Welcome to the Future.Bible Podcast, where you'll hear profiles of individuals and Bible-inspired organizations making a difference in the digital world. In each episode, we'll bring you stories of innovation, advancement, and real-life change. Are you ready? Let's get to today's episode.
Welcome to the podcast today. This is the place where Kenny Jang and I get a chance to interview leaders, innovators, and entrepreneurs at the intersection of Bible and technology. And looking ahead, we want to see what is happening right now in that space. Today we have Theo Nicolakis with us. Welcome to the show, Theo.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Real honor.
And you are the Chief Information Officer of the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of America. What do you get to do there?
Well, first of all, it's really a dream come true because it's a position where I have the opportunity to bring both my theological background and my technical background together. And, we talk about scriptural engagement. And one of the things that I love about what I do is being able to envision that in the digital world. In practical sense, the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese headquartered in New York City. We're the headquarters of the Greek Orthodox Church in America, an eparchy of the Ecumenical Patriarchate. We have about 500 parishes nationally and 8 regional offices called metropolises. So I'm responsible basically for all the technology for that infrastructure.
Wow, that's a big organization to support. And do you have a team based in New York, or is it distributed across different sections of the country?
We have our core IT team out of New York, and then we have our Internet Ministries program out of Boston, located at our seminary, Holy Cross Greek Orthodox School of Theology.
Gotcha. That's pretty cool. Can you share with us, I guess, just giving everyone here a sense of, because a lot of people don't think church has an IT department, or that they actually have someone looking over strategically how to use technology for faith. What's one of the, I guess, 1 or 2 big picture things that churches need today from technology? What are some of the things that you're trying to equip? Is it data? Is it just information, databases, profile information? What are some of the things that, is possible today for the church?
Well, the first thing when we're posed with that sort of question comes with, I think that my primary job is orientation. And I think that as a technology leader in both the tech and religious space, it's to really orient the church into what the appropriate use of technology is and what that means. And one of the fun things over the years has been sort of taking emerging technologies and figuring out what that application means. What is its morphology? What are we going to choose to leverage or partner with? So in a more practical sense, I think that from a Greek Orthodox perspective, an Orthodox Christian perspective, it's been the question of how do we engage our faithful, how do we engage Christians into living Scripture on a daily basis? And one of the first projects that we started envisioning it back in 94, 95, and then brought it to fruition around 96, was really synthesizing our worship life with technology. And what we did at that time was the Orthodox Church functions on a lectionary. So we have daily scripture readings that are organized. And what we did is we developed an algorithm at that time that computerized the generation of the appropriate scripture readings for scripture engagement at that time. We've since brought that to a website back in 1996. We brought it to a mobile app. And now we're bringing it to streaming devices with an Apple TV and Roku and some of the modern platforms. So from a leadership perspective, I think that's really what it is how do we stray not too far to the right, not too far to the left, and keep the right way that's ultimately going to lead to people's salvation through scriptural engagement.
That's amazing. When you mentioned 1995, I think of the year that I got married and the year I graduated from seminary. And that was pre-internet, pre-smartphone. And how fast the world has changed. And it's encouraging to hear how your denomination, your network of churches have kept up with some of those changes and giving it good thought about how to use technology appropriately. That's one of the things I appreciate as a plain vanilla evangelical, that our brothers and sisters in the Greek Orthodox Church and the Catholic Church are very thoughtful about technology rather than just being pragmatic to use it as a broadcast tool or something like that.
No, absolutely. And the one thing that I would even say is to try to take a holistic approach, because for us, it's not just doing one thing, but the holistic approach of the human person and their relationship with God. So when we look at the notion of scriptural engagement, let's say through daily pericopes or segments of scripture, it's, well, how do you supplement that also with the prayer life of the church? How do you supplement that with devotional elements and aspects? So it's really trying to look at, from our vantage point, what the church has delivered to us over a 2,000-year period, and then what do you translate to the digital world? How do you do it? And then what is the relationship between digital and offline? So I think it's been a lot of fun. It's been a real blessing to be able to engage in this ministry.
Now, the big question that people have is, what does that look like?
Yes.
Now that you've given it that a lot of thought, what does a mobile app experience in a Greek Orthodox context look like beyond the
Beyond just lectionary
reading? In terms of prayer, in terms of conversation, beyond lectionary, or are you working on that on the drawing board?
Sure. There's multiple elements. The first thing that I think is important for both an Orthodox Christian and non-Orthodox Christian audience to understand is that there's a prayer cycle in our church. Mm-hmm. And that cycle begins really with the dawn of the new day. So a mobile app and that experience, I think, needs to mimic that, because not everyone can find themselves near church. Not everyone can find themselves near a place where that prayer cycle resides. So when you log into the app, it should notice, for example, what the day is. What are the fasting regulations? Because in the Orthodox Church, Wednesday and Friday are typically fast days. Sometimes you have fast-free days or different regulations. So I think announcing the day and what that is one thing. Secondly is the time of day, the prayers change in the Orthodox Church. So having a prayer for that particular hour, complemented by the saints and feasts that might be commemorated, complemented, as we said, by the pericopes, and then prayers for different tasks. So a prayer before I start my workday, a prayer of thanksgiving, a prayer for someone who might be suffering. And it's always a blessing to do extemporaneous prayers, but sometimes when we're in these contexts, it helps to have prayers that have come down to us over the centuries. So we also have complemented that with live broadcasts. So people who can't physically go to services can do that all through a unified experience. And I think that what's important that we always convey is we never see the digital as a full and complete substitute for the community. And one of the things that has made an impression on me in the early Christian texts in the 2nd century is we know that when Christians couldn't participate in the Eucharist, the deacons would bring it to them if they were sick or what have you. So participating in the community in that experience was fundamental. And I think we need to keep that. And that's part of what the balance is between how we measure what technologies to adopt and how to interpret them.
Both DJ and I have been involved to varying degrees in different church online communities. Has there been any pushback or concern? Because I think that is typical, where people feel like if you're starting to stream an experience like a worship service, then all of a sudden everyone feels like what you're trying to advocate is that we get rid of all our buildings and everyone's just going to sit at home and watch Netflix and church and that's it. Right? It's always the extreme. Right. But I'm sure that you've felt some pushback or maybe not. Has the community embraced that type of seeing into the worship experience and that interactivity that social and the net itself is inviting people to do, right? As we continue to evolve, now we have multiple screens going on in the homes and things like that. What has that experience been internally?
So I think anytime you have an emerging technology, what I always find out is you have a group of early adopters and you have a group of naysayers that this is evil. And I've had conversations with church leaders, one of whom who I know very well, and greeted me one day and said, Mr. Nicolakis, the internet is evil. It is the spawn of Satan. And then greeted me warmly and said, what can I do for you? It's good to hear your voice. So, and when I look back historically, it's some of the same arguments that were used to the printing press, to the radio, to television. So the way, again, that I tend to look at it is within the church, my job is to have the gift of discernment, and the team to have the gift of discernment, and to choose what is the appropriate thing to adopt, how far to take it, and to realize you're always going to have critics, and to prayerfully reflect and believe that what you're doing is the right thing, that it's God-inspired, and ultimately it's something to help bring people to salvation. And, fortunately, unfortunately, I can look back now over 24 some odd years of experience of doing this. And I'd say more often than not, thankfully, our instincts have been pretty spot on. And when you're grounded in a scriptural perspective, when you're grounded in the life of the church, there's no better measure for giving you the guidelines to do that. So we feel incredibly blessed with the support that we've had. You'll always have critics. Christ himself had his critics. So I think that makes us feel like we're in good company to just persevere. And the Greek word is to have hypomone, patient endurance, which we're always happy to do.
Yeah. One of the things that I guess things are changing and we've been to conferences recently where we noticed more and more the people in the room for any experience, whether it's a conference, whether it's a church service, whatever it is that's being streamed online, almost we're at the tipping point where the majority of those things reach more people online than the ones in the room. And so I think that's one of the things contextually, experientially, from facilitation, moderation, host point of view, who do you privilege? Who are you talking to? What's your, there's no right or wrong answer, but what's your sense? Do you privilege? Are you talking to the people in the room where you might have anywhere from 50, 100, 200, 300 people in the room for a worship service for the average church in America? Yet, if you put stuff online, that you actually might hit some, exponential version of that, 1,000 people, 2,000 people live, and then even on demand further. Are you talking to the camera, or are you talking to the people in the room?
I think that the way that I would answer that question is it requires a newfound skill set, because ultimately what we're doing is we have a hybrid. It's really Marshall McLuhan where the medium is the message. So the way that I would answer that specific question is anybody who's speaking, even what we're doing here, we always need to be multi-mediumed in our approach. So yes, I may be talking and we might be having a great interview here, but at the same time, we have to think about an audience that's listened to it on demand. Is there a transcription of something? Is there a reprint of something? So I think that we need to look at audio, video, in person. We have to look at print, because even Christ's teaching style, from parable to sermon, likewise sets the same example for us. Is we need to be multi-mediumed and interdisciplinary in our approach. And just because you have a new technology doesn't mean that things were different 2,000 years ago. It's just that the mediums have evolved and changed, and we need to be cognizant of that. Great perspective.
Well, spoken with much wisdom and reflection, and really appreciate that. I have a big question, and I'll just let you talk. So I know the Greek Orthodox Church is really big and values incarnation, which you've mentioned, and iconography. So you can speak a little bit to that, but one last thought I have is you are also a great partner for us here at the .Bible top-level domain, and you have 2 domain names with websites there at GreekOrthodox.Bible and Septuagint.Bible. So that's not a historical look. That's actually a future-oriented look. Would love to hear a bit of how you are incorporating that into the church life.
Sure, absolutely. First of all, and I think I've said this before in private conversations, to me, the advent of .Bible is one of the most exciting things that I have seen over the past decade. And the reason why I say that is the way we are engaging in Scripture online is changing. And it's changing in ways that I think that we can both predict and not predict. And in order to be able to anticipate and have a space where we can create that next gen experience, carving out a space in the domain area was absolutely brilliant. I remember when I first heard about the idea several years before it actually went to ICANN and became a reality. That was just my first gut reaction, was brilliant. As you said, we have been early adopters and vocal early adopters at that. At the very outset, I think that what we faced with challenges internally, which any organization is going to face, is what's .Bible. And I think we've become so ingrained with the typical domains of .org, .com, that we're going to be in a period of maybe 2 to 3 years where until these new top-level domains gain some traction and people are used to seeing different ones, we're going to be in a group of early adopters. But that's exciting. That's so exciting because it's going to be the crucible through which the creativity and the skill sets of scriptural engagement are really going to come to fruition. From a tech point of view, I think we all know that top-level domains are key to branding. They're key to search engine optimization, SEO. So at that very level, I think that churches and organizations need to think about adopting a .Bible strategy as part of the core of what they're doing every day. So it's not should we do it, but it's going to be what is going to be the result if we don't do it. It's going to be a mandate in a similar way to back in the day, well, do we need a website or Yellow Pages ad? So that to me is the most obvious question and answer. And maybe it'll take a few years for the average organization, but I'm here to tell you right here and now is it's not an if, it's a when, and it has to happen. What we're doing today is we're using our .Bible domains first and foremost as a way to centralize all of our scriptural tools. So what I alluded to earlier in some of the conversation, we assembled all these into what we call the online chapel. So it's sort of our digital arena where someone can engage scripture and devotional material. It's a place where someone can download the apps, have a central area for scriptural search, and some of these other tools. So at the very, very basic level, it's a way for Christian organizations to assemble all of their scripture engagement in one logical place. There's incredible value, as we know, in that in and of itself. The second thing that we're doing is we want our Septuagint.Bible space to be the go-to place for the Septuagint, both for the text itself, and the Septuagint is the Greek translation of the Old Testament that was done, by the Hellenistic Jews, prior to the time of Christ. So that's a key element for us, is to have the text available online. It's the official Old Testament that's used within the Greek Orthodox tradition, and to be able to have that available for the churches, for devotional use, and for scholarly purposes as well. So these are two critical areas that we're giving some initial focus to.
I just love how thoughtful or intentional or even strategic that is. And you can imagine that if you're you doing that approach with just these two website resources, from a technology standpoint, the intentionality across the board must be quite dynamic. I really appreciate you spending time with us and sharing some of those insights. I'd love for you to come back on the show at some point and share with us some other things that you guys are doing in terms of the innovation space with your church, if we may. Please have you back in the future.
We'd be honored anytime.
Now, people are going to be listening to this podcast, sharing with others. There are going to be some people who might want to reach out to you directly. What is the best way for someone to actually get connected with you directly? Is it LinkedIn? Is it the carrier pigeon? Is it email? Tell us how someone can get in touch with you.
Sure. Someone can always drop me an email at theo@goarch.org, GOARCH.org. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter, and typically at T Nicolakis, TNICOLAKIS. Very happy to engage. It's an honor to be here on the podcast, and really just applauding everything that's happening, because we can learn from one another and all of our brethren. You know, ultimately the goal is salvation, and these are God-given tools, and hopefully we can all have the right orientation and apply them appropriately.
Well, thank you again. I love that team approach. And again, you've always been collaborative and open-handed. So appreciate you sharing the little bit of the secret sauce inside of Go Arch that you guys are doing. Thank you so much for being with us today. For those of you listening, thank you for listening to the Future.Bible podcast. Please let us know your thoughts on today's interviews and suggestions for future shows. We continue to ask for your input because we want to be the #1 show where you'll meet innovators ready to talk and really discuss all the different ways the world is evolving about technology and the never-changing message found in the Bible, all for deeper engagement with Scripture. Theo and DJ, thank you for an amazing conversation today.
Thank you.
And remember, the last call out, as always, please visit our website at www.future.bible. We've got the videos, transcripts, and other resources for you to dive into and connect with us further. In the meantime, be blessed, and remember to be a blessing.
Thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed today's session, please help us share this podcast with your friends, colleagues, and family members. You can do that by leaving a review on iTunes or by sharing our website, www.future.bible, with your network. Don't forget to join us next week for the next episode of the Future.Bible podcast.